All right, hello, and I want to welcome you into what I'm calling the science of COVID. We're all experiencing something that has never occurred in the history, at least in our lifetime, or really that's been recorded. There have certainly been other pandemics, and there's certainly been major changes in governments and populations, but what we're seeing in our lifetime is unique and interesting, and I want to look at it very objectively. There's something to be learned here. This is one of the most important subjects we can talk about because number one, it can affect your life. It can affect your health. It can make the difference between your death and your living and that of your families, knowing the truth about what's happening. And there's a lot to share. And I'm going to give you the facts. This is the science. This isn't the left side or the right side. This is getting into the science of what's really happening objectively. And I'm being guided to share this. And if you're here to listen to it, you've been guided to hear it because there's a growing number of people all around the world that are kind of awakening and realizing that there's something to be realized. And it starts out maybe at a very physical level, our health, our well-being, that of our family, our society. And then it moves into the political realm and the social changes that are happening in the world right now. So it kind of takes a whole nother dimension. And we're even going to go farther because ultimately it's a spiritual shift that's happening. And I want to tie that in and make sure that all our eyes are open to see what's really happening, because most people don't. Most people have been hypnotized and we've not been told the truth. And so this is a revealing, this is an awakening. So let me go over to screen share and jump right into my PowerPoint presentation that I've developed for you guys. Let's see, here we go, slideshow. From the beginning. So hopefully you can all see this, the science of COVID, a scientific analysis of the pandemic. What are we talking about? And by the way, I think most of you know, but I spent a great deal of my life studying banking and finance and being an analyst and looking at statistics and numbers and charts. And so I kind of took what's happening from the vaccination and medical perspective and looked at it from an investment banking perspective and looked at try to find the truth in the studies, for instance, and look at the numbers and make sense of them. And that's where I think we're going to learn the most. And then another part of my life just happened to be natural health. And that's what got me particularly interested in vaccinations in general. And so I've done a number of talks and I've written a book. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to enlightenmenttv.com. And I have a whole section on the New World Order and a whole section on the Natural Health Handbook and all the resources that we're going to talk about today. You can go there to get the links or watch the videos and kind of prove it to yourself. So everything I want to share with you today is something I hope you see it comes from a legitimate source, and two, you can go and check it for yourself. So you don't just have to believe me. So these are just some of the brands. We have Enlightenment Television, and that's where I've recorded a lot of these talks, and we'll all put this one eventually. I have Enlightenment Radio you can go to. It's listened to all over the world. We'll talk more about that later. And it's ultimately for global enlightenment. So everything that we're sharing is because there's an awakening occurring in the collective consciousness of humanity. And what's happened is a lot of times we don't wake up until something shakes us. Isn't it interesting how, like, when someone having to confront death or a disease or the loss of a loved one, a divorce, a physical problem, lose their job, something shakes you up, and that's when you ask God for help, or that's where you start questioning more or looking a little bit deeper. Well, COVID is that for us as a world. We're beginning to really question not just our health, we're questioning who's trying to tell us about health. We're beginning to question what's really going on because we sense it. So as you breathe in, you sense it to some degree, you wouldn't be here listening to me. And I'm really reinforcing, and what we're doing is we're we're putting more of the pieces of the puzzle together because something tells us something's not right. And so we want to listen to that. I invite you to breathe in. So this is supposedly what a COVID virus looks like. I have a different opinion about viruses. You know, most of our DNA is a viral DNA, and they're simply the building blocks or waste products of other cells. But the Medical Association has made it out to be an evil, and this particular one has something called an S protein we hear about and we'll talk about later. And that's what these big nodules are sticking out. So they're distinctive from other viruses and even other coronaviruses in the type of proteins, in this case the S protein, which is a receptor site. So what is COVID? And we're getting this nowadays. Everybody's using the Center for Disease Control as kind of the where to go for legitimate information. So let's start with that. And by the way, I don't want to come into this with a supposition that it's one way or the other. I want to look at all the opinions. Science is looking at all perspectives. So I obviously want to look at what the CDC actually says, as well as those that question what they say. Why don't we look at all those things? It's about our health after all. So the CDC describes coronavirus as a viral vector vaccine. Now they're talking about the vaccine for coronavirus. It contains a gene. And that's important you understand. And this is the first time this is being done in history. That they're taking a gene that encodes for a spike protein. So they're taking something that's on a COVID type vaccine, and they're giving us the code so our cell can make it. Understand? So this viral vector vaccine contains the gene that encodes for the spike protein on the surface of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So they're using another patented virus that we knew as SARS. It came out some years ago, and there was something of a panic when that came out too. It was very overplayed. It goes on, they go on to say, once delivered to our cells, the gene is transcribed. So that's a process that takes place in the cell we're going to go over later, prompting our cells to make spike proteins. So simply put, it's a program for our cells to make the spike protein like a COVID virus. The presence of this protein triggers the body's immune system to produce antibodies to fight the spike protein, which then prepares the body to fight against another SARS-CoV-2 should it enter the body. Although there's a debate that any other type of SARS-CoV-2 virus that would enter our body would be a different strain, so our immunization wouldn't necessarily work for that new strain, but they're not talking about that right now. Now, when we go to Madeira, one of the leaders, that's Fauci's company, he was the first CEO and he's one of the major stockholders. So it's interesting that the man who's probably going to profit most on making and selling this vaccine, next to maybe Bill Gates, has an ownership. There's already a conflict of interest between Gates and Dr. Fauci, and they're the ones leading this big campaign for everybody in the world to get the vaccine. That right there should raise questions. That used to be considered out of integrity and even immoral to do that. And now it's just accepted. But what Madeira says, our operating system, that's how they're referring. Isn't this interesting that the company that Gates is backing, Gates being the leader in the pharmaceutical industry now, is with Madeira and of course with Pfizer. He's also spoken highly about him. But they're calling it an operating system, and that's what Bill Gates got famous for, creating the world's first universal operating system for a computer. And we're going to get back to that story later too. That's a good one. But they say by recognizing the broad potential of the mRNA science, we set out to create an mRNA technology platform that functions very much like an operating system on a computer. It is designed so that it can plug and play interchangeably with different programs. So they want to be able to go in and out of your DNA and put different things in it, right? Or take something out, like an app. He says this unique mRNA sequence that decodes for the protein is what they're making. That's step one. One of the first points I want to make that's really important, and it's never talked about, and this is a theme we're going to come back to again and again, how come we don't hear about this in the press? Well, there's a very good reason for that we're going to address upcoming. But right here, because I want to make sure you know, you can go and look all this up for yourself. Here at the Patent Office, the U.S. States Patent, here's the number. Note that it's dated May 22, 2007. It's a coronavirus isolated from humans. I just want you to know that this is a patented product that they've been working on for years. And the one that is been cycling, and there's already several variants of it, by the way. It's not talked about much. But different people have different patents. Here's another one that was made in 2017, coronavirus. So I want you to know that, and the reason they do that is then when they make an antidote or a vaccine for such a virus, they can own the patent. Owning the patent can help them make money. Well, who owns the patent? Ultimately, these have all been bought up by guess who? Bill Gates. So isn't it amazing? Bill Gates owns the patents for it now. He owns the coronavirus, essentially. He owned the vaccine for it. He owns the lab where it potentially was first made or where it was first released, and we're going to go and study that. So it's his brainchild. And what is it? Well, when it first came out, one of the first things, you'll see that it was thought of as a biological weapon. Matter of fact, Dr. Francis Boyle, who's the director of the Bioweapons Act, he was the guy our Congress put together to kind of say, well, what is a bioweapon? And they were trying to create laws globally so that we wouldn't flood the world with viruses that could kill people or go out of control. So he's a world expert on bioweapons, and he and his staff worked on creating the very laws that we have that restrict them. And he says it's a bioweapon. So do top military leaders, not just our own military leaders, the Russian military leaders, Israeli military leaders, leaders all over the world said this is a man-made bioweapon. Here's Mi Ling from the lab in Wuhan, quoting her, coronavirus is a biological weapon. Hello. She's now in exile because she'd be killed. These things get recorded in the press, but then they get wiped out. They're never put on the mainstream media, but they're there if you look. Former top State Department investigator says COVID-19 outbreak may be the result of a bioweapons research accident. And he's talking about the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Wuhan, China, that both George Soros had funded and Gates is a part of. And Fauci and Obama both went there during that administration. They gave, I think, several $1 million. I'll come to that later in our talk. And that's not a conspiracy theory. This is part of the news. It's just not being shown on ABC, NBC, BBC. And if it gets put up on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn, they just take it off. So they're censoring the news and banning the information, just like the Nazis did. So who's the CDC? If everyone says, well, that's kind of the go-to for information on the virus, we all kind of assume, I think, that it's an independent organization doing study to protect us, to make sure that we aren't harmed by, say, a virus. And that's not what it is at all. The PR spins it that way. And so Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's a lawyer who is familiar with vaccinations and the potential damage that they do in general, has jumped on this and looked at the science, and they got a whole team of people. It's not just his opinion. He's not the doctor, but he's got a whole staff of top medical doctors in this field that look at this stuff. But he'll tell you that the CDC is not an independent agency. It's a vaccine company. The CDC owns over 20 patents, and they sell about $4.6 billion every year. So they don't they're not an independent voice, and they're not looking after us. We got to kind of destroy that myth when you keep hearing, and most of their numbers have been distorted. You have to adjust or look at the other factors when you look at their numbers. We'll get to that too. Who funds it? Well, guess what? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and here's Pfizer, the guys that are making the vaccine for the coronavirus are the biggest contributors to the CDC. So if it's not obvious to you, the people that put the money into an organization have a big say on how that organization is run and how they present themselves to the world. So let's look at Bill Gates. Some of you may know this already, others may not, but you know, he became one of the world's richest men by creating the Microsoft Corporation, which was a spinoff of IBM. His mother was one of the major shareholders of IBM, if you didn't know. And they spun off this part because they wanted it. And most of the people that actually created the software, it wasn't Bill Gates himself, but they were people originally from IBM. They either hired or transferred them over to his company. One way or the other, it grew to billions, as you know, and he became one of the richest men. So they said, well, I'm going to put it towards a good use. It sounds very noble. And maybe at one time it was. But he ends up putting his money, 4.3 billion has gone, and these are ongoing payments to the World Health Organization. So he and the United States itself are the biggest contributors to the World Health Organization, so no one has a bigger say in what the World Health Organization says than Bill Gates. And then he's put 3 billion in Gavi, which is the organization that's trying to connect with all the departments of health in all the countries in the world to get everybody on the same page about needing the vaccination. They're leading the vaccination campaign. So he's putting billions of dollars to make sure everybody buys his vaccines because he's investing in all the vaccination companies. And he'll own it. He's put 870 million into the Johns Hopkins, and they're the ones that have done these data studies. A lot of times when you look at how many projected deaths and stuff like that, well, I'm a statistician. I'm looking at their numbers. I tell them they're bogus. They're using models that aren't accurate, and they're trying to make it a bigger, scarier thing than it was or is. He's put 18 million over in the National Institutes of Health with Fauci. Dr. Fauci was the chief medical officer for. And Fauci, again, is incentivized financially to promote the vaccinations too. And we'll talk a little bit more about him. One of the scarier ones we're going to put more attention on is Microsoft and Gavi's investment in ID 2020. So a lot of people think this is a conspiracy theory, but it's all online. They have their own website. They've had seminars. They're already doing all they can to promote the idea that everybody in the world gets a digital ID and that it can be tracked, and it be tracked through the 5G. And people just don't want to believe it, even though they spell that out. It's been planned, and the technology already exists. One of the most interesting things that happened is just before COVID first rolled out in 2020, remember, during the winter, they had just finished doing a simulation, Event 201, sponsored by Johns Hopkins, which again is sponsored by Gates, the World Economic Forum, which is the cartel or the shadow government or the world government, if you didn't know, and supported by the World Bank, and then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So let's look at that. Who are these guys? Look at this. Can you believe it? They had an event. This was a coronavirus pandemic. Now, when they had this event, the public had never heard about coronavirus. Nobody had ever heard there was a panic. Now, Gates had already said, hey, we got to watch out, a big pandemic is coming, but he didn't use the word coronavirus. So in October in New York City in 2019, just months before the Wuhan deaths started popping up, because that was, originally we thought it was in January and for February. Turns out it might have been early as December. But look, October, they were just finishing up, and it was all sponsored by, again, the World Bank, the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the Federal Reserve, the banking cartel, which is the New World Order, or the people. And so here's a full of it. You can actually go on the internet, look it up. And so they got business leaders in government, public health, the CIA was there too, and they all coordinated, how are we going to work together to make sure people social distance, wear masks, stay quarantined, do what we tell them. That was all planned. This is the new normal. That was all planned. Excuse me. So take a deep breath, check this out. So what's going on? Who's really controlling the world? It's interesting because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is now one of the biggest supporters of the National Institutes of Health. So where their money goes, their power and control goes. They're also, it goes to the United Nations itself. It goes to the World Health Organization, which is technically a part of the United Nations, if you didn't know. And these were founded by the Rockefellers, and we're going to see that relationship in a moment. And then Bill Gates also is one of the biggest sponsors of the CDC. This is a great, go to band video to find this stuff, by the way. They have all kinds of information. So how come we're not hearing about this, if all this is true? And here's where people like to say it's a conspiracy theory. This is a kind of programming. It's known as cognitive dissonance. When you hear conspiracy theory, you've been conditioned. All human beings that watch the news at all, a wall will go up, thinking, "Oh, that's silly." As soon as they hear conspiracy theory, because it's a way the media or the CIA has used to program us to stop thinking about things that maybe we need to think about. So if they tell us as soon as we hear this word that we will no longer listen, then we will naturally shut off. And that's part of the reason why most of the world's kind of hypnotized and not seeing what's happening, because they could all do the same research I did, as an example. So if you didn't know, the Council on Foreign Relations was founded back in 1921, and this by the Rockefellers and by the Warburgs and the Rothschilds, the people who were the richest people in the banking and part of the intelligentsia, really, that wanted to create a one world government. This is the explicit desire of Rockefeller himself, what he called Fabian socialism, where democracy is really kind of clumsy in a world government. We need a world government run by people that know how to run a government. And those, he thinks, are the bankers and the intelligentsia, which tend to be them. And then we look at the Bilderberg meeting. That was founded just after World War II by the royal families of Europe that thought, well, look, we got to stop fighting each other. Because a lot of the wars, World War I and II, the Crimean War, were basically different family feuds. And so they said, well, let's all work together. We'll create one Earth Inc., but we'll rule it. So there's the Anglo-American cabal, you might say, and they meet every year since 1954. It was founded by the House of Orange, Queen Beatrice, and of the Netherlands. And they're related, if you didn't know, to the House of Windsor of England. So in the Bilderberg meetings, there's always on the steering committee different barons or dukes or people that they kind of rotate who gets to chair the meetings, but they all show up and are kind of overseeing them. And then it's the world bankers, and then you'll see the heads of these conglomerates. And they're told what they can and cannot put in the press, what they're supposed to spin in the media. This is where they get their marketing. So think of this as the board of directors meeting for World Inc. And then as Asia began to emerge, China, at first Japan and then China, they kind of asked for a seat at the table. So under the Jimmy Carter administration, they created the Trilateral Commission, working with Rockefeller again and the United Nations and the Council on Foreign Relations. See, they're all connected. And so a lot of those people work in a lot of the news media in Asia. This is just showing the connections in the Western media. So there is a very controlled media. We are brainwashed completely, and the information that's given to us is very much selected and spun a certain way. Who's Bill Gates? We're all told that he's like this, genius kid that gave up going to college to found one of the world's biggest companies and take over the whole internet and computer industry. He is no doubt a brilliant man, has a good mind, but what you may not know is one of the first things he did is he was developing software. Back then it wasn't the internet. Internet hadn't existed yet. It was called the DARPANET. I was working on it back then. I was first programming using key punch cards. And I remember when he was developing this software, one of the first things he did is developed a virus. And he sent it out through the network and he crashed computers all over the world. He became famous for that. He is the man that invented the world's first computer virus. Then he turned around because he had already created a software that would prevent your computer getting a computer virus. So he turned around and sold his software to DARPA, or to those people that were using the DARPANET or the ARPANET before it became internet. And then of course later, as he developed a software system for the masses, the Microsoft, what was called the Microsoft software, he put this antiviral software into his software package. Like if you didn't use his package, chances are you would be attacked. So he was kind of famous for being devious in that way. And we won't go into all his lawsuits and how the company became a monopoly. But look at the sinisterness of him now working and supporting a lab that is, we are told, may have been the ones that created the coronavirus to begin with, and then him going through all this effort, all this money on his MSNBC. NBC is MS, Microsoft NBC. And so he's now a controlling partner in NBC. What you hear on NBC is this constant, boy, you better get a vaccination, and scaring people to get it. So he'll have this annuity of people having to get his snake oil injected into you every year, year after year, maybe several times a year for the rest of your life. Every person in the world, it's the greatest Ponzi scheme ever invented. Now, who's his dad? You'd have to know, how did he get? You see, when people get really big, most people don't realize there was someone behind them. Even movie stars, there's someone that's supporting somebody's rise to fame and power. His dad, William Gates Sr., were partners with the Rockefellers. Here he is with David and Rockefeller Jr. So, who are the grandsons of John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil, the monopoly oil baron, whose father was a snake oil salesman, interestingly, Bill. So their whole family's been corrupt, and that's a whole book in itself. And David's the one that's promoting the New World Order. He's not shy about it. And his dad, or Bill Gates' dad, that is, William Gates, was partners with the Rockefellers in creating something called the eugenics movement, which is basically weeding out the lower bred human beings and lowering the population of the world. It was the inspiration for Adolf Hitler's extermination camps. He read the work of Gates and Rockefeller, and the other one was Ford. Ford was very much into this, and Carnegie, the big barons of the Industrial Revolution. So Gates, who himself was on Planned Parenthood on the board, his father promoted the eugenics movement, and the people, the money behind him, and the Rockefellers who were behind them, because he's partnering with the Rockefeller Foundation. Their goal is to reduce the population of the earth by over 90%. And they're making a vaccination that has a long history of sterilization, and him talking about needing to sterilize, which we're going to talk about. This is them all at the Carnegie. They're all a member of the Carnegie Foundation. So here's Judy Woodruff with Anthony Fauci. And I just wanted to point out that here's Bill Gates Sr. This is Lady Annenberg and Lady Astor. This is George Soros. This is David Rockefeller. You see, so they're all part of a group. They're all part of a class. They're all working together. They have a goal. And this is it. Here's Bill telling us for himself. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's heading up to about 9 billion. And if we do a really good job on vaccinations, healthcare, and reproductive services, we could lower that by 10 or 15%. And he's been asked, he's said this several times, and he's been asked about it several times because, of course, it was very eye-raising. And at first, he was quite cavalier about it. He also has used this formula below that CO2 equals P times S times E times C. So people times services that are used by per person times the amount of energy for that service times the amount of CO2 gives you the total CO2 going into the atmosphere, which is destroying the world. So there's this belief by the United Nations and by these billionaires that we need to radically reduce the population of the earth. The P is what needs to go down. And when Bill did his TED talk, he made that very clear. We have to radically reduce. And so this word, some people say 85, say 90%. The tombstone in Georgia, which is believed to be Masonic, says it should be 500 million or 500 million people. The United Nations had these documents that talk about this. One's called Agenda 21, and again, people think that that's a conspiracy theory. I have my copy of it right here. And now they have an Agenda 2030. Well, what it says, the present vast overpopulation, now far beyond the world carrying capacity, cannot be answered by a future reduction in the birth rate or through contraception, sterilization, or abortion. So traditional means. It must be met in the present by the reduction of the number of presently existing. This must be done by whatever means necessary. So this is what has got the alert people, and this is what's frankly talked about very openly if you go to the Council on Foreign Relations, which I do and read their stuff, or what comes out of the Bilderberg, which actually went to Italy, to Torino, when they were having a meeting. They wouldn't let me into the meeting, but I saw that it was happening. And they did talk about what was in there, and population was one of the agendas. Now, what's happening with this pandemic, I'll call it the plandemic, is actually part of something much, much bigger. It was over 10 years old. This document, again, from the Rockefeller Foundation. So just remember, royalty, Rothschilds, and Rockefeller. Those R's are the ones that are kind of in this ruling class trying to control the world. And they have this document. It goes back, I think it was 2011. Okay, and you can get the PDF. You can download it yourself. It's called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And what it is, the whole document, just I've read it, and you can too. I have the PDF if you want to see it. It's their vision of how we're going to create a world that is better run, but with technology as the driving force, in a world where there's less people, and that we have a better control over the people and the population. So they wrote, let's look at some things that could happen to bring this control about. And I think it's page around 13 to 18, this area there, they're calling it lockstep. There's a chapter. It says, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. So this is a scenario they're suggesting could help bring about this world they want to create. So they're kind of saying, these are some things we can do to bring this about. How can we bring about this new world order where we're basically, it's called Fabian socialism in the view of Rockefeller. Instead of a Leninist, Stalinist state, there's a gradual takeover and control of the masses that they're actually going to want it. So let me read you what it says. And this is a scenario saying this year, the pandemic that the world has been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese, they say, was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. A majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on the economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt. So they're imagining, okay, air flights screeched to a halt. Debilitating industries like tourism and global supply chains all came to a halt, just like what happened, right? Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. So this is what they're thinking they're going to need to do to bring this about. The pandemic blanketed the planet, but disproportionate numbers died in Africa and the Southeast Asia, where the population is most dense. So, and then the people rejected this. They stood up. We can go back, and I don't want to just read you pages of information, but see, first, here's some highlights. First, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval because of the chaos. People were looking for, leadership. It says citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. Let that sink in, you guys. This is how they're devising. They bring about a new world order. They put out this pandemic. It scares people, and so people are willing to give up their sovereignty. That's really the goal. It's not that, oh, gee, now people are more healthy because we found a virus that helps people stay alive. Not at all. That they accept less privacy, that they accept more dominion over their life. Citizens were more tolerant, even eager for the top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. Look at this. Biometric IDs for all citizens. For example, tighter regulation of key industries. This goes on and on. All the stuff that they're doing. Matter of fact, they talk about the new normal. That wasn't just invented. That was planned to be used when they were going to try and take over the world. So to keep 6 feet apart, wearing the mask, those were all psychological, that's part of psychops. The mask wearing, cutting off the expression of the face, people becoming numb, people taking control. This is psych warfare. So what do we know about the Rockefeller Foundation? You can look this up for yourself if you want to know more. But it's basically the first staged event. All the things that we had gone through were planned by them. All the leadership of the world knew that this was coming. And then you had event 201 to say, okay, here's our dry run. Are all you guys all ready for this? And they kicked it off, and the news cycle started doing their spin, convincing us that we need to be scared. And that's where we're going with it. So look at, just real quickly, the Rockefeller Foundation. What are they famous for again? Eugenics. Creating the American Mental Association. So the Rockefellers, are the most invested in the companies making money in medicine. They own it. They own the journals. They own everything about it. Everything that they have is to drive people to medicine. It's one of the most profitable industries in the world. Heart disease, cancer, some of the biggest margins on return on investment. The only thing bigger is vaccinations. They're also behind the big government monetarism, which is where the banks have control over how money is spent in a government or around the world. And finally, MK Ultra, that we're going to come to later. So take a deep breath. Let's see where this is going. This is going to get actually kind of fun, but I want to make sure you're connected. So let's look at some of the mythologies and understand to really understand what's happening. Here's Gary Mullis. He's actually the inventor of the PCR test. And he has been trying as hard as he can to tell the world, this test does not tell you that you're sick or not. It doesn't tell you if you have COVID or not. Matter of fact, he says, if you run the test enough, you're gonna get a positive result, whether you have COVID or not. But they're shutting him out because it's convenient to use this test to try and give, because more people or not are going to get test positive, that they like that because there's an incentive for them to have positive test cases. But Terry says, I should say, PCR is just a process that is used to make a whole lot of something out of nothing. It does not tell you that you're sick. It does not tell you that a thing that you ended up with is COVID. It really wasn't going to tell you. So this is him telling the world, here's what the CDC tells doctors. Guidance for certifying deaths due to coronavirus disease, 2019 COVID. In cases where the definitive diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made, but where it's suspected or likely, it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on the death certificate as a probable or presumed cause of death. In these instances, certifiers should use their best clinical judgment determining if a COVID-19 infection is likely. However, please note, testing for COVID-19 should be conducted whenever possible to come to that conclusion. And sooner or later, if you do the PCR test, you're going to come to that conclusion. And if you didn't know, doctors or hospitals, probably more often, will make money if it's COVID, and they won't get that money if it isn't COVID. So there's a financial incentive to keep marking COVID. We're going to go into this more too. But let's look at the perspective. What I've noticed is, and on this chart, you're going to see that ways of putting pandemics in perspective. On the left side, it's the history of pandemics. So they have kind of a pictorial graph here of the size of something that looks like a virus. So we look at all these viruses that have come down through history, dozens and dozens of dozens. And when we finally come down to COVID, it's this little pink one. It's hardly noticeable in the list. And so when I see that there weren't massive amounts of people dying, I started questioning. I drove to during the 2020 pandemic, and again in the 21 pandemic. I drove to our biggest hospitals. I walked into the hospitals. I talked to the staff that I could, that would talk to me. I talked to, in 2020, they were laughing. People like the valet at Hoag Hospital and at Mission Hospital. I walked in there, I said, where are all the people with COVID? He goes, dude, it's so much nonsense. There's no pandemic. He's going, I haven't seen a single person. He says, there've been some sick people. Same thing with the ambulance drivers. And there are actually signs that say event. And there were guards, eventually armed guards came and said, I'm sorry, you have to leave. And you're not supposed to be asking questions. Well, why? I did it again at Mission Hospital. Where's all the people with COVID? I went over to this emergency testing stations because they were expecting crowds of people. They were empty. I did it myself so I could see with my own eyes. And then I did it again in 2020 and I saw the same thing. So where's the pandemic? Here's a chart. I believe this is UN data. Black Death, you can see, okay, wow, that really was big. Plague of Justinian, great small pox plague. You know, so over the years, Spanish flu, of course, very famously. Look how big the Spanish flu is. Third plague, HIV. And here at the very bottom, here's COVID-19. But you have to look really, really hard because the death number is like 0.03%. And that's including the skewed numbers, the numbers that got exaggerated, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. The total deaths still were literally insignificant. So let's look at the next page. COVID has no effect on the death rate. So at Johns Hopkins University, this is November 26, 2020, Michael Swade is reporting. This comes out from the Brand report. COVID has no effect on US death rate, says. This is the first pandemic. Here's the ending quote in the conclusion. Therefore, according to Brand, who did this study, and it was, you know, of course, a very big study, peer-reviewed. Not only has the COVID-19 had no effect on the percentage of deaths of older people, because it's really scary for older people, right? He's saying COVID-19 has had no effect on the percentage of deaths of older people. Not only that, it's had no increase in the total number of deaths, period, which means there's no pandemic. If the total number of deaths in a population doesn't go up as a result of any disease, then it's not a pandemic. It's just a normal year. People die of, it's sad that they die of various viruses, usually that are triggering the pneumonia, and it's the pneumonia that's hurting people. And that occurs when there's a compromised immune system, regardless if there's a virus matter. The Hopkins study also says all of this points to there being no evidence that COVID-19 created any excess deaths. Total death numbers are not above normal death numbers. We found no evidence to the contrary, period. It's there. Here's another number from USA Today. Where's the pandemic? Even they questioned it. So if you look at the years 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, going on all the way up to 1920, it shows you the total number of deaths. This is, again, for 2020 at the end of the year. And we see from 2019 to 2020, it hardly goes up. Matter of fact, end of year number, it slightly goes down. What about the world numbers? So we go over here to this other graph. And this is from many different sources are using this, but this is showing the top causes of death around the world. And of course, heart disease, look at heart disease, way over here, cancer, way over here, accidents, down, keep going down, lung disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, kidney disease, suicides, liver disease, sepsis, high blood pressure, Parkinson's disease, they're all over COVID. Here's COVID, this little sliver, this little blue line. It hardly compares. There's not any other real disease. Under it is a lung obstruction, some kind of an accident. And the suicides are more than double the COVID deaths per day. So on a world level, it's not a pandemic. Let's get some more updated information. Let's see if it makes a difference. Next slide is world death rates up to 2021. So again, let's look at the rate of death around the world. In 2018, 7.54, 2019, 7.57, so slightly higher, 0.44%. In 2020, it's 7.61. So it really didn't go up that much. Matter of fact, it went up another 0.44. It went up as much as it did the year before. If there was a true pandemic, it wouldn't just be going up the same amount, it'd be going up more. It would be increasing at an increasing rate. We'd see some kind of spike. There's always some kind of population increase. We're seeing the death rate, the rate of death will increase as well because there's more people getting older. So you expect it to go up a little bit year by year, but it's not going up any more than it's been going up. And this information tells us very clearly, up to 2021 at 7.645, that's only a 0.30. So it went down from 0.44 increase per year to 0.40. It went down 0.01%. That's not a lot, but it's kind of showing you it's not really going up. In fact, it isn't going up. They're lying to us. Here's the numbers from the CDC. Everyone says, well, you've got to use the CDC. You can't trust other numbers. Well, here they are. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Look at the graph, the bar graph. Again, it shows a slight dip, not a pop up. We go into the historical trends. Here's another slide. Here's yet another source confirming. Now, remember when we were looking at international death rates, I'll go back, they were at 7.5 around and heading up to 7.6. Maybe 7.7 was coming up, right? Now we look at the United States, it's 8.5 going up to 8.9, almost 9. It's a lot higher. So So look at these numbers. I know you don't necessarily all know statistics, but you can see that 8.5 going to 8.6, going to 8.7, going to 8.8, going to 8.9 in 2021 shows a very natural and slow growth rate. Over here is the actual percentage growth rate. And again, the numbers have actually slowed down over the last 2 years. This is in the US. Let's pop over to this next chart. Again, here's the CDC. Deaths worldwide: tuberculosis, hepatitis, pneumonia, AIDS, malaria, shingles, rotavirus, seasonal flu, whooping cough, your thyroid, your cholera, your meningitis. All these things are above coronavirus so far. Measles, rabies, yellow fever. Oh, here's coronavirus. So coronavirus is more dangerous than leishmaniasis, ethnocoloccosis, and dengue fever, sleeping sickness, and Ebola. Come on, you guys. So where's the science in this? If 6 feet works, why wear the mask? And if the mask works, why 6 feet? And if both work, why are we locking down? And if all of them are working, then why are we needing a vaccine? And if the vaccine is so safe, why is there total liability? And if you didn't know, it's important you do that Sweden, Denmark, Nicaragua, numerous African countries, and Pacific Island nations, I should say, have done nothing for COVID. There was no quarantining, except maybe sometimes in limited cases, no particular mask wearing. Again, usually unless it's staged for the sake of the news. And I'm in touch with people. I've been in touch with friends of mine in Sweden, and they're telling me, no, we're not doing anything. If you're sick, you stay home. And if you look at the numbers did not spike. The news said they were, but it turns out they exaggerated. Same thing in Denmark. The people are fine. They weren't quarantined. Nicaragua didn't do a damn thing. They knew that it was a lie from the beginning with. They don't trust who. Many African nations, I was in touch with my friends in Tanzania, and they're telling me, no, we're not wearing masks as a whole. And India too, by the way. We're hearing all these people are dying in India, and yet I've had dozens of my friends in India saying, I'm not seeing what's going on in the news. And besides, they die in mass. Not that it's any good. There's cases of people dying of other diseases. But what we're seeing in the news is something different again. I've not worn a mask except for going to Trader Joe's for 20 minutes. None of my friends at the beach are. There are 16 states that weren't mandating masks, and they're fine. So I believe this whole thing is a hoax, and masks have nothing to do with our health, that it's a part of trying to control us. No lockdowns, here we are. Governor of Florida and the governor of Texas, they're not imposing these mandates, and they're saying they're fine. And they appear to be. We don't see big spikes in their states. Is it a pandemic? Well, what do the doctors say? World Doctors Alliance has spoken out. They got thousands of doctors all over the world, and they said there's no reason for this panic. Doctors for Information, I should say, they say the corona panic is a complete play. It's a scam. It's a swindle. It's high time we understood that we're in the midst of a global crime. Another report, news report, shows that over 30,000 health professionals have signed a declaration against the COVID-19 lockdowns. Say it's a hoax. These are doctors all over the world. Different groups have popped up, but you're not hearing it on the news. The pandemic is over. The former Pfizer chief scientist says the second wave is fake. These are fake COVID tests. And here's a doctor, or I should say an attorney, that's representing a whole group of doctors that are actually suing the CDC for this fraud. Now let's look at what the vaccine's actually doing. So I think we have a case, number one, that it's an experimental vaccine. It could be dangerous. Two, that it's all really a hoax. And a few billionaires are just going to get richer as a result. But it's also that it's doing a lot of damage, that there's something more cynical at stake. So I want you to see this. This is the VAERS, V-A-R-E-S, is where someone who gets a negative reaction can report and prospectively get compensation from the government if they can prove it was a result of the vaccination. But hospitals and doctors are very much non-incentivized to allow that to happen. They don't want to claim that the reaction was a result of the vaccination. But even now, if you just go down to this graph in the lower left corner, you can see the number of reactions, which is gigantic. If you actually study the subject, you learn that the amount of injuries from vaccinations is going through the roof, and it's one of the most underreported stories. But even on this graph, you can see, oh my God, this is dozens of times more than there's ever been. There's a giant reaction. So let's talk about what are they doing. Everyone take a deep breath. This is going to get fun. Let's get smart, because wisdom is power. Now we're getting kind of wise that this may be a hoax. What is it? What are they trying to do? What is this going to do to us if they inject us with this? This is genetic engineering. Well, on this slide, I have a picture from the CDC itself. So it shows a little virus. It shows an injection needle. It shows a little red line that represents a snippet or a little section of gene that's in the RNA. It says mRNA vaccines are made using genetic material from the SARS virus. It cannot cause a SARS infection since you don't have the whole virus. But, okay, I could argue that, but I'm going to just move on. mRNA acts as a blueprint that instructs healthy cells to start producing the same characteristics like those outer spike proteins that are found on the SARS virus. It's so nasty. So it's going to show your healthy cells how to make these nasty things and put them on your healthy cells. And that's what the picture actually shows. It shows this green little cell over here. It shows this plus the snippet. And now we've got one of your green healthy cells all covered in these red nasty S proteins. And the very next slide, it says these spike proteins trigger your immune system. Well, no kidding. You don't want red spiky things in your immune system, in your body, because it's not good for it. Clearly, that's why your antibodies go after it to destroy it. So they're saying, well, that's good. Like these spike proteins are going to trigger your immune system respond. And by learning to recognize and destroy the spikes with the immune cells. So what they're saying is the next time there's a COVID-like virus, your body's going to already be able to make these antibodies. So they're claiming your immune system's going to be stronger, but what you're really doing is you're showing your body a way to create something that's not good for you. Even if your immune system is able to respond to it each time, how do you know it's always going to be able to do that? They have not been able to prove they can stop or control that process. And I've looked for those studies. It's very hard to get the information, by the way. They don't make it easy for the public. So that's a concern I would have, before I would allow myself to be injected personally. The other question we want to ask ourselves is what's in it? So I've got a snippet, I've got a copy of Pfizer, and different ones have different combinations. The real point is the gene. There are different salts and stabilizers they'll put in. And they also often put in, as Pfizer has done here, potassium chloride, which they say is an adjuvant. Just like when they put micro or nanoparticles of aluminum or mercury, thimerosal, and different kinds of MMR vaccinations and so forth as a preservative and as an adjuvant. So it will both keep it so it doesn't go bad, and also because it will help trigger an immune response. Well, no kidding. Your body it'll kill you. Matter of fact, potassium chloride is the same drug they use to inject into death row inmates. So I think it's safe to assume they're not putting so much potassium chloride in any individual shot that it's just going to kill you. But no doubt people are going to be sensitive to this substance and that it could create a pretty big reaction. There are other ingredients too we'll get to here in a minute. There was also an argument, so take a deep breath, because so much of this is being promoted by people we knowingly want to reduce the world population. We know that because of Bill saying it, and it being in written literature and being a part of the culture he grew up with and all the people he associates with, the Rockefellers, Fauci, and the whole group, the royal families, they all want to lower the population of the world. And sterilization and creating infertility is one of the most often suggested ways to do it. So a lot of countries have experienced sterilization from different immunization experiments in particularly Africa and other third world countries. India is another one. So the Gates Foundation is getting kicked out, as this article explains. Global push for vaccinations target Africans amidst infertility claims. So they don't want the vaccinations because they're concerned, oh, you're going to try and sterilize us again. This is known all through Africa. When I went to Africa, they asked about this. They were concerned. So there's two different comments we want to make on a study that was done by doctors, peer-reviewed, about the vaccination. Point one is the formation of so-called non-neutralizing antibodies can lead to an exaggerated immune reaction, which is what I was just talking about. How do you know it's not going to just keep going? When's it going to stop? Especially when the test person is confronted with a real virus after the vaccination. This so-called antibody depressant amplification, or ADE, has long been known from experiments with coronaviruses in cats, for example. In the course of these studies, all the cats that initially tolerated the vaccination died after catching a wild vaccination. So the body did the opposite thing than create a proper immune response. It overreacted to the coronavirus that it was exposed to, and that's what killed the cat. Do you understand that? See, no one's really explaining this. So I feel like, I feel I'm being guided by the divine to tell you this, tell the world, because you should know these facts. This isn't me, this is doctors, and other doctors know this and report this too. Here's another point. The vaccinations are expected to produce antibodies against spike proteins of the SARS virus. We've already established that, nobody questions it. However, these doctors say, spike proteins also contain Cysteine homogeneous proteins, which are essential for the formation of a placenta in mammals such as humans. So this could potentially, they're not saying it is, they're saying this could potentially affect the production of the proteins you need in a placenta to create life, in other words. It must be absolutely ruled out, these doctors say, that the vaccine against SARS could trigger an immune reaction against this Cysteine-1 protein. Otherwise, infertility of an indefinite duration could result in vaccinated women. That's their opinion. That's not mine. In addition to the potassium chloride, these guys said the mRNA vaccine from the biotech Pfizer ingredients box contains polyethylene glycol, which is PEG. 70% of people develop antibodies against this, which means that they can go into an allergic reaction. This could be potentially fatal for people. In other words, they have a hard time breathing. I want you to think about that. The vaccination could actually create a potential breathing problem, and it could potentially make you infertile. It's not me. That's what the scientists say. That's what the doctors are saying. There are many of them. Okay, here's another one. Vaccinations may spread COVID. Vaccinations could spread COVID. Well, in fact, it's been known that a lot of vaccinations were the cause of diseases. Even Salk, who invented the polio vaccine, in the end of his life, we're saying most of the cases of polio that we find today are the result of people getting a polio vaccination. Oh, shoot. Here we go. Uh-oh. Yeah, just zip ahead. I hit click and it forwarded to the next slide. And I want to address this point. This is a really important point before I move on. Does the injection work? The COVID injection is not even known to stop the spread of COVID. Think about that. They all want you to get an injection, and yet they're not saying it prevents the spread of COVID. Let that sink in. Dr. Larry Corey, who oversees the National Institutes of Health COVID-19 vaccine trials, said just in November of 1920, the studies aren't designated to assess transmission. They don't ask the question. We don't even know. There's no information. And another point that was brought up, and that the FDA confirms, you see, I have the links right here so you can look this up for yourself. The first vaccination dose correlates with an increased COVID-19 infection rate. So it's suspected COVID-19 cases that occurred within 7 days after any vaccination were 409 in the vaccinated group versus 287 in the placebo group. Almost twice as many people or animals got the vaccination, or people actually in this case, got the vaccination than the people that didn't. And this is coming from Pfizer itself. Here's another study. It says the vaccine doesn't prevent coronavirus infection. It says, well, it'll help prevent serious illness. That's the claim. But here's the most important of the slides. So everyone take a deep breath. You've got to almost take a breath. It's so much information. I want you to clear your head. And this one point alone, it's shameful that the press hasn't reported this, and that Facebook and YouTube, and Google, and all the other media giants are repressing this information, because I've tried to put it up myself and they just take it down, and now I'm banned. They've destroyed my business. They've taken me down on every platform. But we get this. You can go to primarydoctors.org, primarydoctors.org/COVID. It'll be obvious when you're there. What happened to all the animals in the studies? So we had studies with mice, we had studies with pigs, we had studies with cats, we had studies with monkeys. They did these studies and they were all kind of rushed through because it was so urgent to get the vaccination out as soon as possible. And as soon as the studies were done, they looked at the animals and they said, okay, it's cool, we can go, boom. But no one told you what happened. This technology has been tried on all the animals. And in all the studies been done, all the animals died. All the animals from all the studies, not the animals in the placebo group that didn't get the vaccination, they're fine. Only the animals that got the vaccination died. Not immediately from the injection, but months later from other immune disorders, sepsis, cardiac failure. So the immune systems were destroyed as a result. So they say, this isn't me, but it seems important that you should know. Quote, no experimental coronavirus vaccine has succeeded in animal studies. And in the ones that they've studied, that it typically causes liver inflammation in the test animals. Here's another study. It says, Dr. Lee Merowit, in animal studies after being injected with mRNA technology, all animals died. It says, in the animal studies after mRNA injections have been administered to cats, when the virus arrived once again, so they exposed the cat to the coronavirus after it had been immunized. And they said it arrived like a Trojan horse, undetected by the cat's own immune system. The virus multiplied unchallenged, and all the animals involved in the experiment died of various causes. What a brilliant way. What if half the population got vaccinated and half of them died months later of various causes? Is that a cause for concern? Well, the former vice president and one of the top science officers, it's debated whether he was the chief science officer, but vice president of Pfizer himself, says he fears a massive depopulation through this mass vaccination. The former head of the biggest pharmaceutical company that is pushing this vaccination is no longer with them. He's trying to warn the public. He concludes, from what appears to him to be an orchestrated, off-the-wall falsehoods that are being played out by government and media alike, we are in the presence of evil and dangerous products he calls the COVID vaccine. And then it's interesting because that became very, very famous and spread virally in the internet. All the fact checkers and, you know, the media wants to counter this. So what they say is, did Pfizer's former chief scientist say there was no need for vaccines? He never himself said he was the chief scientist. He didn't need to. He would have been the boss of the chief scientist. Michael Yeardon last worked at Pfizer a decade ago. So they're trying to spin it. You know, they're saying, did he say there was no need for a vaccine? Of course, he never said that. He said that this vaccine was dangerous. He didn't say there wasn't a need for a vaccine. So you see, they're already twisting his words. Did Michael Yeardon, who last worked for Pfizer a decade ago, he never was the company's chief scientist. His anti-vaccine argument relies on predictions that never panned out. So this is called public relations. This is spin. This is what the fact checkers are doing. This is what the media is doing. That's why there's that conglomerate I told you about with the Bilderbergs and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission all working together. So there's one message, working lockstep to present, wear your masks. This is the new normal. We're all going to lock down. It's all propaganda. So Yeardon says there is absolutely no need for vaccines to extinguish the pandemic. I've never heard such nonsense. You do not vaccinate people who are not at risk from a disease. And top doctors all over the world are saying this. You're just not hearing it because of the media. So let's summarize the dangers, what we've learned. Primarydoctors.org kind of did this for us. Does the COVID injection work? We've already learned it's not a matter of it stopping the spread of the pandemic. That wouldn't be financially smart for them if it did, would it? Actually shows that there's an increase of COVID infections. In fact, all the animals died. There's also an ingredient called polyethylene glycol, which is PEG or PEG, is one of the ingredients, and it's known to create anaphylactic shock. And it's so well known and has created it that now the CDC is recommending intubation kits at vaccination sites everywhere. So they know that you end up needing an intubation kit a lot when you get this vaccination. There's a financial reason for this we're going to get to in a minute. Plus the catatonic lipid coating on so there's a fat, a lipid that is surrounding this snippet of COVID. Otherwise it'd be destroyed. They're trying to protect it. See, your body knows it shouldn't be there. So this is how they slip it in. But it creates a reaction. And it can end up hurting your liver and your immune system and your lungs. Look at that, the top thing it does. Isn't that interesting that an injection from an mRNA vaccine could create a reaction that will affect your lungs and breathing? On mask wearing, just so you know where to get the information. Here, Graham Ledger is pointing out on Facebook, and he's getting censored, that there was all these studies that have been done. Here's several of them: McIntyre, Zimmerman, Sus, and their conclusions. There is limited evidence for the effectiveness of influenza viruses being transmitted to wear a mask. Here it is again, the CDC, emerging infectious diseases. Here's 7 different doctors that pervade the literature on mask wearing. And they said evidence from these 14 randomized controlled study trials did not support a substantial effect on the transmission of laboratory confirmed influenza. The masks do not work, period. There are some, not just doctors, world leaders that are laughing at this. And they've told us, the CDC at one time said it. Who has said it? Fauci has said it. Dr. Bricks has said it. The manufacturers say it on the side of their mask. I have a box of masks and it says these will not protect you from COVID-19. Look at the box. OSHA says wearing it longer than 20 minutes without changing it can decrease your CO2 levels and create an increase of bacteria growth that could make you sick. So wearing the mask can make you sick. It could actually give you a bacteria that could cause pneumonia. Do you see what's happening? Do you see how twisted everything is? People are so brainwashed, so hypnotized by the media. Who says masks should, here it is on the news, so we got a screenshot of it. Masks should only be used by healthcare workers, caretakers, or people who are sick with symptoms like a fever or a cough. So all these people, you know, double masking and wearing shields, all that's part of the scare technique. It's psych ops. And here's a doctor that has the strength to say it. I've been a surgeon my whole life. This was at the White Coat Summit. America's frontline doctors all over America coming together and say, hey, this is BS. We're being lied to. There's no pandemic, no need for masks. This vaccination is very suspect. He says, I've been a surgeon all my life, and until now, 2020, I've never heard that masks made a difference in viral transmission. This is Dr. Lee Barrett. Masks don't control viruses, they control you. So they see this as a front. Now let's look at numbers again, manipulating the data. But Steve, they're numbers, you know, we kept hearing. So the deep state betrays America. The CDC admits, and this is, which I double checked and it's true, check it for yourself. They add all cases of pneumonia and flu with coronavirus deaths. So all of a sudden, boom, the new second sweep, there's a new sweep of death rolling through America. You heard all the news stations telling us we've got to be careful. Guess what? They just added everything together. And they lied. They know that. You think CNN and BBC don't know? Here we are on Fox News even. In cases where a definitive diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made, but it is suspected or likely, go ahead and count it. So what are they doing? Flu cases, here somebody did it for us. Two different reporters. Flu cases, 2019, 2020, there are 38 million people, according to the CDC, by the way. This year, only 1,000 people? We're coming to the end of the flu season? How could that possibly be that flu and influenza, pneumonia, just pretty much disappeared from the face of the earth? Oh, this is the United States. No, they just added all as COVID to make it look scarier than it is. It's a normal year of flu. So keep your immune system strong. Why would they do that? Why are doctors so incentivized? Well, first of all, we saw that they were told, they were instructed. And we're getting hype on it every day in the news. They're all the directives they get, whether it's the pharmaceutical industry, National Institute of Health, the CDC, they're all telling them the same thing. It's COVID. You say it's COVID. So listen to this. From their own document, I would remind him, so they're talking about the numbers. At any time healthcare interests with dollars, it can get awkward. He says, right now, listen to this carefully, Medicare, which is the major person paying for the COVID, because we've drawn from the taxpayer trillions of dollars to give to Medicare so they can give to hospitals, give to doctors. So look what they're doing. Right now, Medicare has determined that if you have a COVID admission to the hospital, you'll get $13,000. You get incentivized if you had COVID. If you just get the flu, if you've just got pneumonia, but you've also got a heart condition and all the other comorbidity factors and you die, you don't get 13,000. So they're marking 13,000 down, and doctors and nurses all over the world will tell you this is happening. just put COVID down because otherwise we're going to be out of 13,000. Now look at this. If COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, remember how there's reactions to the vaccination that would cause you to need a ventilator? Then you get paid 39,000. That's almost 3 times as much. So he's saying, so tell me after 35 years of medicine that that's not going to influence. Obviously it does. So who's Big Pharma? We know we can't trust them. We know Madura, who's making this thing like an operating system for Gates, and that he'll get pig rich off it because he's got stock in the company, as does Gates. So he's serving his own interest. Pfizer too. Matter of fact, they got sued, the biggest lawsuit in the history of lawsuits, $2.3 billion in 2009. For what? For bribing doctors, for lying, for suppressing adverse trial results. These are people we can't trust, and yet we're told that we should trust them with a virus. It could be a pandemic, or with a gene therapy that's new and experimental and could potentially kill us. And there's evidence to show that our immune system could go awry, but they're suppressing information, and they are. I just showed you. And it goes on. Bribing doctors. So it's been pulled from AstraZeneca, which is partnering with Oxford, which receives billions from Bill Gates, right? COVID-19 clinics, so the clinics are now putting on hold, they say. They don't say they're pulling it. They don't want to make it sound bad, but they're just checking the adverse reactions, because there were. They can't deny that there were adverse reactions in mass. So look what they're doing in the media. Here's, I think his name is Wolf Blitzer from CNN, which is nothing but a front for CIA. And he's an heir to the Vanderbilt. He spent 2 summers. Now, on his own resume, he says he did an apprenticeship with the Central Intelligence Agency. And here he is, one of the news leaders. And here's Blitzer, at the head of the news, telling people the death toll in America approaches 3 million. And now we have pictures of all these guys in these hazmat suits, like they're going into the Ebola virus. It's totally hyped up to scare us. So I'm trying to put stuff up to make people aware there's other opinions. And it's always something scholarly. You see that these are what doctors have said. Here's an example. So Facebook just unpublished me. Now they've restricted and banned me. I can't even advertise a class. Can't boost a class anymore. So Facebook, YouTube, I don't even know what all these are. All the different ones. Here's an article from Forbes. So they're legitimate news sources. This is what the Nazis have done. This is what communists do, is they keep the public from knowing the truth, or at least other opinions. So I got stopped from Nextdoor, from Twitter. So if you want to see where all this data is, I put it at enlightenmenttv.com. And there's a section you'll see, just look for this little bar. It says Natural Health Handbook. Yellow. And I've given a few talks you can listen to if you want. They're short. And then more importantly than what I say, in my book, which talks about vaccinations, it talks about how Judy Gerberding, who was the head of the CDC, saw the study for the MMR vaccination and saw that there was a spike in autism with young men, particularly colored men. And so she wrote back in the handwriting of the report, you got to massage the data here, basically. You got to change the numbers so they don't show such a shocking change in the number of cases. And so they did. They kind of rewrote it so it didn't look like it was that bad. And it got rushed through the FDA and it got sold. But before it could sell like hotcakes, she took a job for Merck, who makes the MMR vaccination. So there was a total conflict of interest because she got 1.6 million in stock in the company. So as soon as Merck started selling the MMR vaccination as a result of her making sure it cleared the FDA, she made millions and millions and millions of dollars and was head of the MMR vaccination department at Merck. So it's a complete conflict of interest. There is a revolving door. These are dishonest people. that lie about the results. It's not just me. It's the New England Journal of Medicine, for instance. She goes, I don't trust any of the information anymore coming from pharmacies. It's all just PR. The head of the most reputable journal for medicine said that. So if you can't question it, it's not science, you guys. It's propaganda. This is a meme, of course, but I agree with it 100%. Like Orwellian propaganda. Doctors speak up, they get punished. So Dr. Judy Mekovitz was one of the world's leading virologists, worked with Dr. Fauci, and she was discovering that, hey, these retroviruses are in fact transmitting the viruses to humans. We're actually giving it to them. When Fauci saw her research, he tried to keep it from being printed or published. They put her in jail before they even had press charges. They were able, through another division of government, to kind of lock her up, to shut her up. They put a 5-year gag order on her, and they completely destroyed her reputation. They dragged her through the coals simply for reporting what she had found in the public. That's how they treat him. So there is a book on it. I've read this book. It gives you it's a good book. It gives you kind of a background on the subject. There are others. We mentioned briefly. Here's Dr. Simone Gold. Doctors are standing up. They're saying mask wearing is bogus. The COVID virus is bogus. But you're not hearing it on the news. Here are world leaders saying it. This man was the president of Tanzania. When I went to Tanzania 2 years ago, he's a scientist. He's got degrees in biology, and they ran tests of their own separate from who had given them test kits. And they said, shit, goats have this, everybody has it. This means nothing. So they decided, these world leaders had said, we're not going to do lockdowns. We're not going to do quarantines. We're not going to recommend taking the vaccination. And within months, look, this is just March of 2021. Within months of them declaring this, they were all dead by mysterious means. And I asked my friends in Tanzania, what do you think? He goes, oh, it was the imperialists. They want us all to get the vaccine. They're going to kill us. They want to sterilize us all. They all know. People in Africa know, because it's been happening to them. So there's people that are speaking up. I want to show you. This is the repressed news. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He sometimes makes the news because his name's big enough, and he's telling you some of the horrible things that actually happen in a vaccine. So he's one of the more credible sources you can go to. Little Children's Alliance, it's a good source. Now here's what the news does to Simone Gold of the alliance we were just talking about. Fox News spins her as a big anti-establishment doctors, big tech silencing. They're trying to silence these anti-establishment doctors. So you see, if you're a Fox News viewer, which is the top news show in America, by the way, you hear that she's an anti-establishment. Okay, she's one of those wackos. She's one of those liberals. All of a sudden, she gets pigeonholed. That's actually an indoctrination technique. That's an MK Ultra technique. That's a mind control technique. That they're going in there to your cognitive dissonance. Oh, she's one of them. They'll call her a liberal or a progressive or whatever the popular name is for the bad guy on the other side. She's a doctor trying to tell people the science, and she's made to look like an idiot. So this is Robert F. Kennedy. This is Ben Swann. He's been totally banned everywhere. You can find him if you YouTube Ben Swann, you'll find him. He's the one telling us the story that 3.7 million went to that Wuhan lab to study coronavirus. Before we ever heard of coronavirus, Fauci was there. Gates give money. Soros is a part of it. They were all looking to build a coronavirus, and they're all looking to make money on it. But so he's banned for saying it, just like I get banned. But there are people, but he's got a bigger following. So look up Ben Swann at Dell Bigtree. So here's Dr. Simone. So the alliance is one place to go, and Dell Bigtree is over here. He has Highwire, it's called. He's pretty much banned, but you look him up if you look a little bit. So he's just simply talking to doctors who are going, this is bogus. We don't do this for this kind of thing. We don't see what they're telling you on the news. There's a disconnect. So Facebook blocks it, Twitter deletes it, Google hides it, YouTube bans it, because they're all part of something bigger. But the real danger, it isn't a virus. It's what's happening to our kids and our society. Our whole society's getting kind of nutty, fearful. Our country's getting divided. Either the people that think we all want to get vaccinated and those that don't, they're bad guys. They're making it bad for all the rest of us. They're shaming us. You know, they're kind of doing this bit. We're the nutcases. We're the ones doing the research usually, but we're the nutcases. What everybody has in common, it says this is a conspiracy theory, is they've not done the research. They're just believing what the news or the social media tells them. They've fallen into the fear, the story, the mind control. So look at what we found about our world as a result of this fake pandemic. More than a quarter of teenagers, 18 to 24, have seriously considered suicide. And these numbers go on to 2021. As soon as we started quarantining and their whole structure at school, suicide, drug use, death rates, all have gone up. Here's this poor kid. My teacher says I'm not allowed to speak at lunch break because I don't have a mask. You know, so you're something less than the other kids. You're a troublemaker. You're a problem because maybe you're susceptible too. Psychology Today even is saying here, America is facing a teen suicide. When you look at the numbers, here's from a video on no lockdowns. You can look up. So I take these pictures. So if you want to go look them up or find them on the internet, you can. Intentional self-harm. Look at this. They're talking about it from 19. Now in April, it's going up 99%. Comparing August from 2019 to 2020. Self-harm and suicide, attempted suicides up to over 300%. This has done more damage to kids than Corona, without question. Perhaps more people have died of Corona, actually. Overdosing from drugs up 94%. Come on. Look at these. What a crazy world, and we don't want it. You look at the truth is you get little glimpses sometimes on the mainstream media, but if you go to alternative press, you'll see all over Europe, all over the world, there are these mass demonstrations. And they always say, it's funny, they'll say a few thousand or a few hundred people were in London or in Paris or in Amsterdam or in Chicago or New York or LA for that matter, or Washington. And in fact, there are many thousands. They always downplay the number. They don't show you, they show you like a little segment of the people that showed up. Or if you go to the alternative press. So we see that we're seeing a lie. They're perpetuating a lie about the numbers. They're perpetuating a lie about deaths, the number of deaths and how they're dying. They're perpetuating a lie about the demonstrations and who these people are. And of course, they're always made out to be nuts if they're protesting the lockdowns and the mask wearing. This is socialism. Let's talk real. And the head of socialism is the head of the World Economic Forum. This is one of the groups that believes in a new world order, along with the United Nations, which would include you, which would include the Bilderbergs and the Trilateral and the Council on Foreign Relations and every other group of elites. They all have, it's not a conspiracy theory. He says in the last meeting, Klaus Schwab, look at this guy. He happens to be a confessed Satan worshiper and Mason. You own nothing and you will be happy about it. That's called socialism. We want to create a one world order. We're going to do away with cash and money. We're going to have a digital currency. You're going to be stamped like an Auschwitz victim with a tattoo. You think I'm kidding? So blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth, says Albert Einstein. And us with these COVID masks over our eyes, I think is a great metaphor for what's happening to our society. Our whole society is getting lied to in the name of socialism so they can put down more controls over us. So here it gets, just take another deep breath. Here we're going to start going into crazy. Look at me, I'm already at 11 o'clock. I hope you can bear with me. Because here we have evidence for a connection between COVID-19 and exposure to radio frequency radiation from wireless telecommunications. So there's no question that it's the 5G, the microwave and millimeter wavelengths. This is from Rubik and Brown, and there are numerous studies, by the way, in Pasadena, Saybrook University here, Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, different hospitals, you know, so there was reputable scientific research. What does it tell you? The bottom line, the outcome, adverse health outcomes. We have an immunosuppression, our hyperinflation and inflammatory reactions in our lungs. Our immune system is compromised in our lungs. What are the symptoms? Here's another study, microwave bets. Check this out for yourself. So they have doctors that look at this. And okay, headaches, high temperature, all the kind of things we see for people with pneumonia or a virus coming from 5G. Look at these cells. The idea is that everywhere we go, there will be some electricity that you'll be exposed to, some field, some equipment in your house, on your block that connects with a tower. So there's got to be a big tower. And these big towers can produce up to 95 gigahertz. They're really, really powerful, and they're really, really dangerous. I know, I worked in this industry. So the idea is you have a big tower, pumping out a lot of electricity, by the way. We're subsidizing this. All the trillions of dollars it took to put this out to our infrastructure, there was a bill. We got taxed for it. It wasn't the communications industry. It paid for this. The public paid for this. And it's designed to hurt us. Now watch this. So we have a big cell, and then there's little cells. So these little cells, so here's a massive tower, a base station. Here's a regional tower. So these you tend to see on freeways, say. Here's a neighborhood one. Here's one maybe just down the street. And sometimes it's just a single tower, like this one or this one or this one. So I've given you pictures so you can look and identify them. There's also meters that show you if you're in their proximity, they go up to a range that is dangerous for you. Check for yourself. So what happened with 5G? It was interesting that they rolled out 5G right when we were under containment during the lockdown. I was looking at some men working at a telephone pole down my street during the lockdown. So I came down, I didn't pay much attention to the lockdown. I walked down and I said, hey, what are you doing? They said, well, we can't talk about it. I said, well, is that 5G? It looks like 5G. Are you putting up this wireless connection? They go, we can't talk about it. And they looked scared to death. Like if they said anything, they'd get in trouble. So they did this in secret. They put them up all in like high schools, for instance, in public places where there'd be no questioning. So what happened in Wuhan just before all these massive deaths that were reported? Wuhan was the province where 5G was rolled out in China. And now it's the center of the deadly violence. This is reported by them in China in the early days. Wuhan, October 31st. So just before, as this was happening, branches of Chinese major telecom operators in China, in the Hubei province, so their state, Hubei, announced the launch of the 5G application in their province. They were proud of it. The first state to have the 5G. They're going to be the leaders in technology. Everybody was proud of it. Wuhan City, the capital of Hubei, is expected to have 10,000 5G base stations by the end of 2019. 10,000 base stations by 2019. When did COVID roll out? 2020. So Song Qing, head of the Hubei province communications administration, said. So the point of this article is to show you that they've rolled out all this 5G, and then what? They turned it on. Boom. What happened? People literally dropped down in front of it. You could literally see, there was a video I have of a man standing in the street. You could see the 5G tower behind him, and he literally fell over dead. Another article says, in fact, the highest death rates outside China have been in places already implementing 5G, like South Korea and Italy. Later it was Iran, but it was Iran when Iran started to roll out its 5G. Remember those big ocean liners were one of the places where a lot of people got the virus? That's where they're all hooked up to 5G. The 5G's everywhere on an ocean liner. You're on one of those boats, you're going to get sick just being in an airport. You would too. All right, so even the NIH admits 5G can actually create coronavirus within human cells. It creates symptoms, at least, of coronavirus, I think is what they're trying to say. New generation of mobile devices like 5G could have the main role in constructing various types of viruses, such as the coronavirus within a cell, study says. We were talking about that. Here at Fortune magazine, just announced, GlaxoSmithKline, which is one of the big pharmaceutical companies, is creating a parent company called biotech company, Bioelectrics, 715 million. What is bioelectronics? Well, it's where something electronic in your body interfaces with your cell phone or 5G, could be a local cell tower, that interacts with the innate intelligence so your doctor or someone else can know if you're vaccinated or not. Actually, my stepfather, who has a heart disease, his heart is weak, I should say, they put in a little microchip in his heart. It connects with his cell phone, or whenever he turns it on, which relays a message to the 5G network, which then sends it to his doctor, and the doctor can see how his heart is doing. So they want to do the same thing. See, this technology exists. People said, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. No, but it can do more than just measure you. But you see, they're spending millions of dollars, billions actually, on bioelectronics. Here it is, 5G manipulation. Here's the patent number. US 6506148B2, nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields and how it affects your body and the dangers. Here's the study done. It's right here in Google Patents. Here's a picture of a chip, we're told, is put on this card for the 5G, and it's called a COVID, COV-19. Why would they put COV-19 on a chip? It wasn't meant to interface with the COVID. Okay, that sounds kind of out there. Yeah, but it is out there. It's been talked about. Bill Gates is very proud of it. Is 5G a weapon, though? Well, DARPA was a weapon. DARPA created the DARPANet for its own use, but also part of the internet was used so that it could accumulate information on the population. They thought if we make this sweet and interesting, then people will use it. We'll be able to have an influence over them. We'll be able to have a control over them. So that was a plan. And electromagnetics is also a weapon, if you didn't know. So when I say 5G stations are dangerous, people poo-poo about a lot. So I went in and I got the manual from the Department of Defense. Here it is, Electromagnetic Defense Task Force 2.0, a report made in 2019 at the LeMay Center for Doctrine that was presented to the Congress and people interested. Use against humans. Generally considered non-lethal weapons, electromagnetic weaponry, however, does pose a health threat to humans. Some common biomagnetic or non-lethal weapons include the effect on the human nervous system, a system resulting in physical pain, a difficulty in breathing. Their 5G weapon that looks like a cell tower creates a difficulty breathing, heart arrhythmia, vertigo, nausea, disorientation, insomnia, and other discomforts. Project Pandora, conducted by the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, included externally induced auditory input from pulsed microwave audiograms of words or oral sounds, which create an effect of hearing a voice that are not a part of the recipient's own thought processes. Do you hear that? An auditory input pulsed in through a microwave that creates a sound effect of hearing voices in your head. They can put voices in your head, and here it is in black and white. So you can read on that if you want. Here's Project Medusa. Here's the active denial system listed. Here's another report on 5G, millimeter wavelength energy as a weapon. From the University of New Mexico, the Marine Corps says it has developed 95 gigahertz. Remember when I said those towers, the cell towers in our neighborhoods go up to 95 gigahertz? The Marine Corps has developed a 95 gigahertz system as an anti-personnel heat ray So it can kill you, it can immobilize you. Here's a picture of it. They put it on wheels. They can use it, they can put it on a low frequency to just scatter a crowd. They can render a person useless, make them drop to the ground, they can kill them. They can also put sounds in their head. And they did that in Iraq. Apparently, the story I heard is that they put in Arabic the voice of Allah telling them to surrender. And the people heard Allah telling them to surrender in Arabic. Okay, what about your local neighborhoods? Those big nasty towers, you don't want to be near them. See these things? Illness and death. This has been known. And you won't even feel it. It may be happening slow. A slow disorientation of your mind, a numbingness of your skull, a lack of being able or a will to do anything. That's the result of this. 5G antenna, lock on target. So these are phased array antennas. You look up at your telephone poles, you look around your city streets, and look for these poles everywhere. This is how they can get to you, particularly once you get chipped. So 5G can focus the millimeter beams, damage your DNA cells, nerves, etc. This has been known. Here's an example from different patents. So I've got some of these patent reports. I put them up so you can look up the numbers. Here's what it says from 1974. It's now unclassified. That they're able to affect with millimeter wavelengths psychoelectronic weapons, and they call it a weapon. Manipulation of twitching, manipulation of movement of the body, heart arrhythmias. They can kill you, can give you a heart attack. They can disorient your brain, they can put thoughts in your head, control your dreams. Here's reading and broadcasting thoughts. So this has been known for some time, and I'm going to go into this some more, but here's an example of one report you can get at the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, if you want to go to the PMC. Here it says the effect of high frequency electromagnetic field in microwave range on your red blood cells. What happens? Very simply, being exposed to these microwaves affects your immune system. It compromises your blood cells, red and white. Here's more studies. Adverse effect of 5G mobile networking technology in real-life conditions. The bottom line, long-term exposure creates a toxic effect on your body. Here's another one. Acute low-intensity microwave exposure increases DNA single-strand breaks in the rats that they've measured. So it screws up the DNA in rats. Still think 5G is harmless, says Scientific American. Warnings confirmed unknown dangers, confirmed and unknown dangers of 5G tech. So we see even Scientific Americans warning us, and I too. So here's a picture of Telenor. I went to, when I was an investment banker, we were actually investing in 5G before anybody heard of it. It was the next step. They already had refrigerators and lights that would go on when you walk into a room. Remember the Nokia, Nokia, and Ericsson. Those were the Scandinavian telephone companies. They're the first ones to bring 5G in and develop it. And so we were partnering. Our company in Los Angeles became partners with Telenor to develop the 5G. That's why I know, and we know about the dangers. The whole idea of putting a massive amount of data on an analog was orthogonal frequency divisional multiplexing, which I invested in research to get this going. So when people say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, I do. I worked in this industry. It gets worse. It's not just a physical hazard to the body, but this man is Zbigniew Brzezinski. He wrote Between Two Ages and America's Role in the Tectonic Era, 1970. Here's a quote from his book. He's the former national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter. So he would oversee the research of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Secret Service, the NSA, and report to President Jimmy Carter and advise him. So there's no man, he's the highest man in our intelligence network. And I had the opportunity to meet with him several times. When I was in college, I used to live in the mansion of a man named Mr. Grove, who was an elderly man who had worked for the CIA. He was head of propaganda, basically, and public relations. He actually worked for the Rothschilds at PG&E, and I was kind of being mentored by him. And I got to meet Barry Goldwater. I got to meet some of the heads of people in the NSA and CIA. And of course, they never told me any secrets or anything, but they had this technology back then, and it was talked about. He says in his own book, soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. So this was planned all the way back when the computer was first rolling out. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. So it was planned. It was an invention. In fact, Stanford Research Institute, well, Google, who basically hired Sergey and Brin they grabbed those guys from a contest they had at Stanford. They picked two great programmers, Sergey and Brin, and they invited them to join Google, which was the Department of Defense. It's the DARPA, put up all the money. And they've been watching you ever since. Here's the actual contract. Here's the date, and you can get the patent is here too, for what's called ultrasonic acoustic heterodyning technology, going back to 2000. This announcement from the American technology company, patent holders, acoustic heterodyning, I'm going to show you their patent in a minute, clearly shows the use of ultrasound for transmission of voice over significant distances is a reality. We can use the voice FM is used in place of normal hearable audio. You can have one method of targeting a person at a distance or even in a crowd with a hypnotic command, which cannot be heard by the ears, but which can be heard and understood in the mind. So they can put a hypnotic command in your head that you're not actually hearing with your ear, but your subconscious hears it. This is a part of the MK Ultra. Okay, here's an image of it. So these towers have this ability, or we're told. And here he is in a radiation suit. That radiation is so powerful, he has to wear a radiation suit. So the acoustic heterodyne technology, patent numbers right here. Methods of apparatus for inducing desired states of consciousness in another person. Here is an example of how it's done. So we have a high tone that's being transmitted along with a hypnotist's voice at a lower modulation. It's introduced at the same time. So what happens is your mind goes into a hypnotic state through these impulses, taking you down from a beta to an alpha to probably a theta state. And then they'll put these hypnotic suggestions in along with it, so you're not really consciously hearing it, but your subconscious is. And it's passing the filter barrier, so it's going right into your brain. It's being transmitted into your brain is more or less a fact. This is what the kind of thing that was done in George Orwell's book, 1984. Let's have a picture of it there. This is Big Brother's watching. He's telling you what to think. He's watching what you think and trying to control it. This is actually happening now. There's the science. It's also happening in the sky, as long as we're looking at, quote, conspiracy theories. For a long time, people said that chemtrails was a conspiracy theory. We've all seen this, like, okay, well, there are trails of vapor when a jet passes, but they don't stay up all day unless they're putting aerosols in there. And aerial spraying is a fact. Our government doesn't deny it. Bill Gates himself is suggesting it. You can go online and listen to his ideas of spraying the atmosphere to reflect the Earth's sun so we don't have global warming. So on the one hand, the news is telling you it's a conspiracy theory. On the other hand, it's so obvious that it's happening. They're controlling the weather, creating extreme weather conditions. They say they can do it. They have, the Defense Department brags about being able to do it. You can look up HAARP, HAARP. There's one installation famously known up in Alaska that controls the ionosphere. They sent rays up to create a heat system that creates a weather system. They've been doing it for decades. They were using weather modification during the Vietnam War. So it's been around. So what are they doing? Here's the patent, by the way, at the Lamar microjet atomizer and its methods of aerial spraying of liquids. So if you don't believe it, just look at you can look at the patents, you can see how they're doing, you can see what's in it. Here's a patent for spraying aluminum oxide because it's cheap. Here's the patent number, here's the date. This was from 1991. They've been doing it for a while. And anybody can just go to geoengineeringwatch.org to get all these facts. There's a whole organization talking about the industry. When you spray the atmosphere with aluminum oxide, though, that aluminum, of course, is a metal. Even though it's a nanoparticle, it's going to fall to Earth. What do you think nanoparticles of aluminum do to people? It makes them fuzzy-headed. They get inflammation in the brain. They get what's called encephalitis. You find people that get aluminum in the brain get some form of encephalitis, and encephalitis, or inflation in the brain, is one of the main symptoms for Alzheimer's, for ADHD, for autism. So a lot of the problems we have are the effect of heavy metals accumulating in our brain, and aluminum's the one that's most often cited. Now, most of the aluminum is probably coming in through other vaccinations, but this just being in our air isn't good for us. And any scientist can tell you that. Now, human chipping, again, this is one of these subjects that people say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But we now know that it's a reality. In fact, it has happened. There are already people that have chips. Here's an example of one. MIT and Rice made this quantum dot tattoo. It was actually Gates's invention. And they have a way of chemical signaling it to create a light. They call it lucifluoride, by the way, like Lucifer. They name it after Lucifer. Because Gates is a Satanist, if you didn't know. I'll explain that later. Most people behind this are. They want to rule the world. They want to destroy most of humanity. They believe the power. God is power. So ID 2020, the idea is there's an RFID microchip implant in every one of us. It connects with the 5G. And then we can be watched. We can know, ideally, it's sold to us as if we have this, it'll create better health and well-being. But they can track us, and they can also control our brainwaves. That's what I'm trying to tell you. This is more than just about health. It's trying to control humanity. So the mark of the beast, I don't know if any of you are Christian, but in the book of Revelation, they're referring to a time where there's going to be end of time. Somebody's going to try and create a one world government. He is the beast. He's the Antichrist or the bad guy. And there's going to be the biggest world war that ever occurred. But you're going to know this is happening because this beast, this enemy of the people, is going to look like a good guy at first, like he's going to try and make it a great world. He's going to try and help us. He's going to have us all wear a sign, though. There's going to be some tattoo, and it says, look at this, Revelation 13, 16-8. And whether you're a Christian or not isn't the point. The coincidence of this is just out of this world. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free or bond, to receive the mark on the right hand or in their forehead. So there's a mark, a tattoo. Number 17, and that no man may buy or sell. So people have been tattooed, slaves have been tattooed before, been used as a decoration, but no one's been buying or selling because of the tattoo. But now we have a tattoo that does just that. And that no man may buy or sell, save that he have the mark, or the name of the beast, and the number of his name. And the number of his name is 666, if you don't know. So 666, so we hear about Luciferian. We hear that we have to have a digital tattoo, and that it's put on our hand. But you won't notice it. And the patent is 060606. Bill has named this after the Lord of Darkness. 666 is Satan, the mark of the beast. And so we're going to have a mark on us of the beast. He's calling it, so 2020 is the year that the patent is given. The actual patent number is 666. That's no coincidence, you guys. And it's a cryptocurrency. What does this have to do with coronavirus? Nothing. But it does have to do with being chipped. Now you have the chip. Now you can buy and sell online through the cloud, and we can watch everything you do and control what you do. You might even be inspired to buy or be inhibited to buy if you have the chip. You understand that. It's very important you understand what they're doing. This is not known by the masses. Yeah, this is why I ask you to share this with people. Satan literally rules the world. You can laugh at what that is, but we're seeing it before our eyes. Israel has a state. At least 12 prophecies have been fulfilled. And now we have the beast creating a one world order and trying to mark us, either in the head. So here's Elon Musk with his Neuralink. Just look up Neuralink. There's dozens of videos that they have. They don't ban it. They think it's great. We're all going to have a chip in our head. It'll interact with 5G, and we won't need to carry a smartphone even. But they don't tell you what it can do to your head, how it can put thoughts in your head, how it can control your mind. And here's the digital tattoo. Oh, Google, you've got the new digital tattoo. Did you know the new CEO of Google, who is the former CEO of Homeland Security? Head spook, person that watches us. Homeland Security is what's watching your internet. So here's an example of some of these. They think if they make them cool looking. So one idea is they just chip you. One is they're going to use the nano needles that will just dissolve and leave a trace in your skin, or maybe actually put it on top. So here's what they think would look cool, that young people will like this. MIT shows off the smart tattoo. Turn your skin into a touchpad. Oh my. Microsoft working with MIT. So again, Bill Gates wants everybody tattooed like an Auschwitz prisoner. And he's working with who? Rothschilds? Oh, who has the patent? Happens to be a member of the Rothschilds. Here's the patent, providing and displaying biometric data. Again, biometric data. So something interesting happened. There's what are called Freedom of Information Act, and different authors have asked for evidence of a project called MK Ultra. MK Ultra, this is getting really good, so take a deep breath. MK Ultra was a program funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and the CIA working together. They were scared of what was called the Manchurian Candidate. They'd heard that Russia and China had developed these processes of brainwashing people. And so they felt they needed to learn how to control mind and suggestibility. So that's a secret project that was only recently declassified. So I knew about it since I was in college, because a friend of mine, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, told me about it. But everyone laughed when I talk about, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. So now what's in this, they've redacted a lot. They probably eliminated half the information that's that or more that they have. But what they have shown us is that there is a committee on human resources to study our behavior and how to manipulate it. So I'm summarizing it here is looking at different degrees of suggestibility. And they came to the conclusion that about half the world's average suggestible, half is very little suggestible, a quarter's little suggestible, and a quarter's highly suggestible. So they want to know about quickly programming people, how to turn people into assets that do as they say. And see the cell tower? The cell tower is one of the tools. So there is a list, 7 things you do to create the highly suggestible population. Number 1 is the cell towers. The 5G cell towers, transmitting frequencies that induce the trance state in subliminal messages. 2, subliminal messages used for behavioral modification that they induce in your head that you don't know. 3, vaccines that alter DNA behavior and contain toxins and nanoparticles. Chemtrails, finely grown metals of jet fuel with barium and aluminum. So you see, it's just like I was saying, that help induce a trance state. Nanotech delivers specific chemicals and metals to alter behavior. Remote neuromonitoring, which is what the chipping does, and what the 5G does, to measure the effect of your subliminal messaging and your programming. So they want to program you. Implants to measure the effect of their work. So you guys, this has been in play for a long time. Now I first heard this, so sit back, let me just talk to you like a friend. We're near the end here. But this changed my life. This is why I'm telling you this story. This very message I'm giving to you in this moment is the result of something that happened to me well, not childhood, but as a young man. In the early 70s, I was going to college and selling, I'd been selling insurance and other things, and I got a degree I should say, a broker's license, and I started in commodities, and I worked in diamonds and gold at this point. It's 1979, and I met this man named Allard Lowenstein, who was both a congressman representing New York and to the federal government, and an ambassador to the United Nations for Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter. He was the first ambassador for human rights. So he was cleared in security, worked with the NSA and the CIA. He was really good friends with the Kennedys, both Bobby and Kennedy, which was really cool to get to know him. I ended up becoming friends with him. I got to know him selling diamonds. He knew all these people that were like ambassadors that traveled countries, and they have large amounts of money, and diamonds are a way you can travel with large amounts of value. You put millions of dollars in the palm of your hand. So I was selling him diamonds. We became friends. And he's the first person to tell me that the CIA killed Kennedy and that there was a one world government and who the Rockefellers were and the Rothschilds and the banking cartel. So there was the banking cartel controlling the world, controlling the governments. And I'm looking at him like, you sound like a conspiracy theorist, Alan, kind of crazy. He was a liberal. You see these books, The Liberal Dream. He wanted to change the world. What I loved about the man is he actually walked with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama. He went down, he got beat up because the Southern people didn't like, he's a Jew, he's Jewish. So he'd get beat up for being Jewish and for standing with the blacks that were asking for their equal rights. He believed in that and helped push for it in Congress. So he was something of a hero to those people, but he was trying to reopen the investigation into the assassination of John F. Kennedy because it was a hoax, what we saw on the news. He said it was done by the CIA. And I can show you all the evidence. He got me started on this path. That's what got me going to Menlo, to Stanford, and the University of Wales, and study international banking, to work for the US government as an economist, to do research for the CIA myself. I know something about this because I've worked in the field. And become then a consultant at Lloyd's Bank, and later to the banking industry, and later work in investment banking and to investigate companies. So I'm used to looking at banking, I'm used to looking at numbers and research, but what this man opened my eyes to see, that I hope in turn I can help you open your eyes to see, is that there's the group of the richest people in the world trying to create a one world government. And if you step out of line, if you threaten their power paradigm, they might start with something as little as trying to make you look like an idiot, but then they'll kill you. And there are many, many cases. So bless Allard, and it's to him I dedicate this work, because he's the first man that really, I think, saw potential in me, and he's the one that encouraged me to go to college again and to get first my bachelor's and then my master's, and to study how we can create a better world. And that's why I wrote Money and Power, The Secret History, to explain what's happening, to explain why do the people who are trying to control the world, why they want to kill him. And they may try and stop me too. But if we care, who are these people trying to create the world? Well, here you've all heard of Rothschilds. Well, let's take a look at the last patriarch. This is Lord Rothschild. There are others. It's a family, and usually within the family, that have had control over the banking cartel since before the days of Napoleon. So by the time we had a country, his bank was well established in our country. He'd been their family, not him personally, had been manipulating the politics. This is Maria Amadich. This is a lady that does the spirit cooking dinner. And she's been retained by Bill Gates to hold dinners for prominent people, retained by this man, the very wealthy container, because they all have something they share in common that most people don't know. And that's this. This is Satan. This is a painting of Lucifer. So she had her picture taken in front of Lord Rothschild, in front of the picture of Lucifer, because their events are Luciferic. All you have to do is look at the symbolism. Luciferism is based on symbolism. It's based on secret. It's about keeping a secret. And if you tell the secret, then you die. And so you see a lot of things like masonry and fraternities and other things that are on the surface that are probably innocent enough. They become the staging ground. They become the place where they find people to see if they can trust them or not. Can you keep a secret? And as you, in Masonry or any other rite of Wicca, and not all Wiccans are Satanists, but the craft itself, this evilness is based on keeping secrets. People that are just Wiccans, or that are good people, are just nature lovers that understand medicinal herbs and astrology and things of nature, and they don't worship a dark lord. These people worship a dark lord. They worship Satan because they believe Satan is the lord of the earth, and they don't, and we're all ignorant, and only the wise see who's really in charge. And you show your strength by showing a dispassion for the ignorant and the unaware. Now, this is one of the leaders of the movement. His name is Henry Kissinger. He was first head of, he's held many different positions, including head of state was his last one. But before that, he was Security Council. He was Nixon's head of security. He was the man that actually wrote the book on how to develop the New World Order for Rockefeller. He worked at the Rockefeller Foundation. He knows the Gates very well. They're all working together to create this other world. And here's one of his famous quotes. He doesn't deny it, just like the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds don't deny that they're going to create a new world order. And he says it cannot happen without the participation of the US. We're the most important component. Yes, there will be a new world order, he says, and it will force the United States to change its perception. So he feels some other force, these globalists, that want to create a one world order, and that's what he says. I'm not putting words in his mouth. Will force the United States to change their democratic ways where we're represented. We're just spoiled brats. Is it satanic? Gee, that's a heavy word to use. But here she is again. This is Maria here. This is what she's famous for. They have gatherings with sites like this and like this, where they're having a spirit cooking meal, a naked woman with this, I think it's a plastic skeleton in this picture, but other times I'm told they use actual ones, and that these people actually drink blood, and they sometimes eat the flesh of human beings. This is a guy named John Podesta, one of the highest ranking people to be an open Satanist. He's confessed it, and here's one of his emails saying, with a sharp knife, cut deeply into your middle finger. This is right out of Book of Satan. When you look at this, what are the ways you worship Satan? What are the things you do to show? When you look at the panda eyes, when you look at people that cover just one eye, that's a sign of this. And they're also pedophiles. It's sick what they do. We don't want to get into here. So here's a symbol of Beowulf. You'll see this now in Capitol buildings. This is showing up in different places or being referred to in different emails. A lot of the Hillary email thing and the Pizzagate thing and what was on Hunter Biden's laptop and all those things tie us to this. And the people that are in control that worship Satan don't want us to see that. Here is the halftime game at the Super Bowl. You don't remember seeing the word Satan flash on the screen if you watched the Super Bowl, because it was only for a split of a second. I had to go down and go frame by frame by frame. I recognized they were using NLP and hypnosis to worship Satan. I'm looking at the flickers. I'm looking at the flicker rates, the speed, the tone, the symbology, the way they're moving our eyes, because I've studied this subject for years. And if I go 1, 2, 3, all of a sudden, boom, the word Satan shows up, and then it goes back to other imagery on the screen. So if only one section, remember in that graph we were looking at before was showing that if it happens subliminally, you don't really notice it. Look at these symbols. Masonic as the staging ground for Satan. So Gmail is what? It's the apron worn by these people. Facebook is the Masonic tribal cane. That's an initiation level you take. Here is the symbol for the Android and Apple store is the Freemasonry symbol. And this kind of a W-like thing is a satanic symbol. Here's the Google Chrome symbol. It's in fact the divine king, the 666. There's a 6 and a 6 and a 6. You can make out of all those sections. One here, one in green, one in blue, one in red. Or it can be a circle with a 9. The 9 in the middle of the circle. What's the name of the biggest satanic church in America? Circle 9. Just a coincidence? No. Google Play just happens to look awful lot like the seal of Satan. And here's Google GPS. The eye of providence. It's everywhere. This is the one that's going to probably throw you the most, and we're almost done. But take a deep breath, because this is important. This will change the way you look at the world. You remember at the election, there was this event, staging, and this guy that we were told was a MAGA person that was leading a revolt, and it was dangerous. And so these Trump people are dangerous. They're trying to do something dangerous. Who are these people? And there's other pictures of him arm in arm. There were several pictures taken. This is Jake Angeli, and this is Michael Voss. Michael Voss is one of the best television producers based in Amsterdam. He's actually Dutch, from one of the royal houses. So he's aristocracy. And he's also, there was a show on HBO called Citizen USA based on him. And it's a propaganda. He's a propagandist. He works for the, more called the New World Order, but to create this event. So this was an event that was created. And we saw when people first showed up and rose at the Capitol, CNN reported it was Antifa. There were buses, the Soros Riot Dance Squad, they were called. People were bussed in, paid by the Soros Foundation to fill up in the Capitol to make it a big deal. And we were told that they were MAGA people. Look at these people. But what you weren't told is that Michael Voss brought his film crew. Here they are here, by the way. Well positioned, because this whole thing was staged. And these were not MAGA people. And that they knew each other. And they were planning to be there. And the big question was, how on earth did this mob of nuts get into the Capitol building, which is one of the most secured buildings in the world? You think, how could they came in? And he said when he was interviewed, because he was there, he goes, oh, well, they let us in. The security let him and his wife in. You know why? Because Michael Voss happens to be married to Alexandra Pelosi, the daughter of Nancy Pelosi. So it was obvious that Nancy Pelosi's sway in Washington, because one of the first things that happened is the people that got into the Capitol went into Nancy Pelosi's office. You think the armed security guards, the Marines that are in those corridors, are going to let a bunch of nuts in the corridor and into the Speaker of the House's office, and they could sit in her chair and take documents off the desk, which they got pictures of? You see how these cameras are there inside the Capitol building, and this is all staged? Stand here, put your buddies over here with the MAGA shirts. They don't look like MAGA people, do they? It's all a staged event. So they got in because Pelosi's daughter is married to Michael Voss. They're both television producers. And this thing, they came there with their cameras. They went into the Capitol. They proceeded with the blessings of the security guards to set up their cameras and let these people come in and tell everyone that they're MAGA people. Jake is listed as being an actor. He's done 3 B movies on IMDb, it said, and he does voiceovers, and he has been paid by people like Soros to show up at staged events like Black Lives Matter or Antifa events. Matter of fact, he was busted within the year for being at a Black Lives Matter. He was a protester. Well, MAGA people don't go to Black Lives Matter riots. It's a different psychology. He is not a MAGA person. This was all used to convince the people of the United States that MAGA people were crazy, and it swayed the election. And it put people that didn't win in power. Look it up for yourself. We won't even get into the voter fraud. It's overwhelming. You can look it up because I have it. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents. So anyone with a brain can look it up. But here's the takeaway, because this is really all about your health. You're not going to be healthy if you listen to what they're saying. You're not going to be healthy if you do what you're doing. You're not going to be healthy if you act like a sheep and let them take your rights away. let them take your health away by them forcing you to be chipped and taking their poisons and being inundated. So the rest of this discussion or this lecture series, I'm going to talk about how to optimize your health and how to create longevity and well-being naturally. So take a deep breath. These guys warned us in the councils of government. This is Dwight Eisenhower, the man that led the D-Day invasion and became our president, the only honest president we've had in my lifetime. And the councils of government was guard against the acquisition of unwanted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Not the Russians or the communists or anyone else. Who's the military-industrial complex? DARPA. The military complex are the people that are buying and controlling the money around the military. So that would be the Bushes and the Rockefellers and the people that have the financial interests in the big General Dynamics and other big companies like that. The potential, he says, for disastrous rise of misplaced power exists. It already exists and will persist. This was his last message to the people. Watch out. These people that are in control of our military and our intelligence. He has said it specifically that the CIA was a problem for him and he wanted to get rid of them. The person that created the CIA was President Truman, and he said that they'd exceeded their mandate and they needed to be trimmed. And then President Kennedy, just 7 days before he was associated, said there is a plot in this country to enslave every man and woman and child. Before I leave this noble and high office, I intend to expose this plot. It wasn't communism. It was this cabal. It was this group of people that are trying to control the world, want to create a one world government. And one way to do it is to the pandemic or plandemic, so we're all chipped. The other is to the technology, the AI. They're going to control us. A lot of you don't know, everyone likes Elon Musk. He's doing some, looks like cool thing. He got all his money from his parents too, by the way. He didn't just was a genius that got money all of a sudden. His family's behind it. His company didn't just get invented. He was the front for something. His grandfather was the head of the technocracy movement in Canada. He got arrested for being a traitor just prior to World War II because he wanted to take over the government and let technocracy rule. That's in history. So who can we trust? DARPA is the military-industrial complex. It's the one that built the internet. You can't trust the internet. The internet itself, the World Wide Web, is a weapon. Your cell phone is a weapon. And your 5G technology is a weapon. It's been weaponized. It's been used, and this is for real. The Information Awareness Network is keeping tracks on everyone. Wherever you go, 24 hours a day, where you are, every device. It's amazing what they keep track of. And they not only know where you are, but they're influencing you. They're learning what stimulates you, what causes you to react, how you respond, how to change how you think. And look at the symbol. You don't think it's Illuminati, you don't think it's satanic, you don't think it's Masonic. I wrote the book on world religions, Looking for God. I've studied world religions my whole life. I've studied Satanism and I've studied Wicca, the cleaner sides, and mystery schools and everything. This is demonic. And their desire to track everybody in the world all the time, every day, and influence us, try and control us, is nothing short of socialism. And it's a real threat to our democracy, to our nation, to the welfare of the people of this world. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. So they're lying to us. COVID means they're going to control you, oppress you, victimize you, isolate us, and divide us. And isn't that what's happening? And then you look at the information we keep getting through the media that like big companies tell us. They lied about protein, about dairy milk, about saturated fats, cholesterol, carcinogenic foods, tobacco, asbestos, mercury fillings, opiates, vaccines, fluoride, GMOs, pesticides, glyphosate, EMF radiation, cancer, from aerosols, lead in paint, natural medicines, chemotherapy, Satan drugs, all these things. So we're going to talk about these. It's how you stay healthy. So there's an emergence. There's a group of us waking up. The virus is engineered. The pandemic is engineered. The second wave is engineered. The need for a vaccine is engineered. The race wars that we're watching are engineered. the weather and food is being engineered. The news is engineered. The world's a stage. And we can see all this money that is hurting us has gone to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett and Larry Ellison and Ballmer and Elon Musk. You can just look at the numbers. We can change this. Be careful that vaccine. I'm saying no. And the ending note is, this is back at Zbigniew Zabrinski, who again I got to meet with and talk to at Mr. Grove's house in Atherton, and talk about these things. His biggest fear, what he's telling people at the Council on Foreign Relations, so the cabal, the people want to create the one world government. What's he telling them? His biggest fear, his biggest danger for us accomplishing this is the global awakening. People awakening, people being in their sleep. That's the hell. That's the power Satan has over them, putting them in hell. To awaken brings you out of that hell. So, you guys, you can find me on Enlightenment Radio. I'm on Audible, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart. I've also got Enlightenment and many others. Podcasts too. And then there's ETV, Enlightenment Television. And I'm also on Amazon Prime and Netflix and so forth. Just go to enlightenmenttv.com. And if you would share this, so my vision is that we share this. How can we change the world? There's one real thing you can do. Information is power. What you have can change your life, and it can help us influence others. I'd like to ask you to share this with 10 other people and ask them each to share it with 10 other people. Because even if one person sharing this with 10 other people will also tell 10 other people, each tell 10 other people to tell 10 other people who do 10 times, we're now reaching millions of people. We can each play a part in the whole world live in happiness and peace. So you guys, I went way over, but I hope this was valuable to you. Take a deep breath. May you be protected and guided by the divine in all your activities, day and night, in all places. And the whole world live in happiness and peace. Amen.